Vengeance Evangel is the third full-length album from Chaos Inception, a Huntsville, Alabama-based death metal band who've kind of moved down to a duo at this point. At some point, they announced this record was in the works. They had a full lineup beyond 2016, and it seemed like a lot of things happened behind the scenes where it just all didn't work out. The drummer to just vocals, they got Kevin Paradis as the drummer for this album, and it finally happened. In 2022, they were done with it. It took them a few years to get it out. Here we go. It's the third Chaos Inception record, and the reason I'm excited about it, and the reason a lot of people are, is because basically the shorthand is that their twist on second gen or late 90s death metal focused on a Morbid Angel influenced sound, particularly Blessed Are the Sick, cranked up to a modern standard, a brutal standard, just as you might find on the first Hate Eternal record, on early Crisian, Centurion. There are more obvious choices to make out there, but they were a notable band, well produced, very, very strong albums front to back, full of riffs, and the ingenuity of the guitarists and the action of each record was very exciting. It was a great addition to, in that kind of 2009, 2012 era where people were looking for something more out of death metal than a lot of the boring, brutal, and technical shit that was happening. It was still modern, and old school death metal took over eventually, but this was kind of the band that had unfinished business beyond 2012. We're going to get to a song here, and then I'll talk a little bit more about what this album is. So in the interim, we've got new records from Quintessentia. We've got a new record from Monstrosity. Black Hole Deity is kind of an offshoot of the band from ex-members. So if you have been looking for more in this vein or from these artists, they've been active and they put out a bunch of records over the last 10 or so years that it's been since the last one. So where does Chaos Inception go in the hands of Matt Barnes, who is kind of the main guitarist, the composer, and the one directing this show? Well, the drummer, Gary White, is now the vocalist on this record. The way I would describe this record in passing, in just the quickest elevator pitch, is Nox's Ixoxar and that level of craft, with a little bit of the more classic feeling of Diabolic's first record, which was Supreme Evil, and it definitely had that very obvious influence from Blessed Are the Sick. That is there on this record, and that's the way to kind of get into its graces. The first several songs really hammer that in. It's not long before they change things up, and that means they're working with some slower pacing. They're working with a lot of different types of leads all over the place. Well, they have leads and they make sense in the song too. It seems really important to the artist to convey the details, defeat, despondency, triumph, and overcoming something, and I think that's important both in telling a story but also conveying the level of death metal that he enjoys, which is probably in line with everything from Immolation to Deeds of Flesh and whatnot. And you can feel that in the precision of the riffs, in the brutality of the meter and tempo of everything as it blazes by. But also, we find that they're stretching out a little bit more. There's a real focus on creating a little bit more atmosphere, on finding a different type of song, on focusing on a different type of rhythm that sticks in mind. And so they've gone that extra mile. They've had a lot of time to put together this record. So you can see the work showing throughout, and we really get there over time, but it will be a blaze through overall. I could talk about classic jazz guitar influenced solos, and I could talk about trampling Immolation-esque beats and all those things, but it's all going to blaze by pretty fast. Really, the overall effect of this record is going to work when you've sat with it over and over. Otherwise, yes, this is a record to go to for riffs, and there are tons of them. There's something I could go on about for hours, just talking about each riff and how I think that's a cool or referential idea that they've expanded on in an interesting way. And I sort of came away from this both enjoying it as like an infernal death metal experience, but also an appreciation for the level of care that went into every moment of it. It's not overthought, it's not overworked, but there's obviously a lot that went into it. For me, that's a very high recommendation. And of course, I had the pleasure of premiering the album a week ahead of its release, so you might have already been listening to it for a week ahead. Either way, it releases on February 14th. Go ahead and check that out for yourself, and then read my review to see if our notes line up. Let's keep the balls, satisfied.